He should have terrified her. A towering male drenched in blood stood chained on the auction block as the pack jeered for his death. No one dared buy him. No one wanted his curse. Until one rejected Omega stepped forward and changed both their fates forever. The entire pack came to watch a stranger die. But when Nicky saw the pain in his silver eyes, not rage, not violence, but a desperate fight to survive, she did the unthinkable. She spent her last coin to save him. And destiny answered. Before we dive into the story, please subscribe and hit the like button. The Crescent Packlands auction square simmered with noise, cruel laughter, shifting paws, the clatter of silver chains pulled too tight. On the raised platform stood a male so powerful the air around him seemed to tremble, yet he swayed as if each breath cost him his life. His wrists were shackled in silver cuffs that burned into his skin. His bare chest was streaked with old blood and fresh poison. And despite the agony, he stared down at the crowd with cold, unbroken defiance. Warriors avoided his gaze. Omega women pulled their pups behind them. And the pack jeered, ready to watch him die. 3 days, Beta Rowan barked, pacing like a satisfied vulture. 3 whole days for his people to come crawling to buy him back. And not a single coin. The crowd laughed. Rogue scum. Let him rot. No one wanted him. No one dared. But Nicky couldn't look away. She'd spent her whole life overlooked, dismissed, rejected, yet something about the chained male drew her eyes like a tide. He wasn't just suffering. He was being slowly killed. And no one seemed to see it. No one except her. When Rowan dropped the price again, 2 gold. Last call. A hush fell. Not because anyone planned to bid, but because someone had stepped forward. A small Omega woman with patched clothes and trembling hands. Nicky. The same girl Rowan had once humiliated in front of the pack. The same Omega they shoved aside in the food line. The same nobody they expected to stay invisible forever. Rowan's jaw dropped. You, he scoffed. You can't afford a loaf of bread. Her spine straightened. Her fear burned away. She reached into the hidden pocket sewn into her sleeve and pulled out 2 worn coins, the last she owned in the entire world. You said 2 gold, she said quietly. Gasps rippled through the square. Some laughed. Some whispered she'd lost her mind. But as she climbed onto the platform, the chained male lifted his head. And those molten silver eyes, bright even through pain, found hers. Recognition flickered there. Not confusion. Not surprise. Something older. Deeper. Dangerous. He whispered a word, her name, though she had never spoken it aloud. Nicky froze. Something shifted inside her, a tremor beneath the ribs. A warning. A promise. A pull. She reached for him anyway. He leaned on her, weight heavy, breath unsteady, but he followed her down the platform steps as if he had always been meant to walk with her and no one else. The crowd parted. Some in awe. Some in fear. Nicky didn't look back. Because deep down, she already knew. The choice she made in that square would change everything. Her status. Her fate. Her wolf. And the dying alpha she had just bought with her last coin. The stranger she brings home. The weight of him threatened to drag her down with every step. Nicky's shoulders screamed beneath the burden of the alpha's body, her legs trembling as they stumbled away from the auction square. His breath came in shallow gasps against her neck, each exhale burning hot enough to sear. She could feel the fever radiating through his torn shirt, could smell the acrid stench of silver poisoning mixing with smoke and dried blood. Stay with me, she whispered, though she doubted he could hear. Just a little further. His head lolled against her shoulder, dark hair falling across a face that might have been handsome before pain had carved itself into every line. She caught glimpses as they moved, sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, lips cracked and bleeding. Everything about him spoke of nobility, of power that had been systematically stripped away. They made it perhaps 30 yards before his legs gave out entirely. Nicky grunted, taking his full weight as he sagged against her. Her knees buckled, but held. Barely. Omegas weren't built for this, weren't designed to haul unconscious alphas through village streets. But she'd made her choice back at that auction block, and she would see it through. Even if it killed her. The village fell away behind them, replaced by the narrow forest path that led to her cottage. Relief flickered through her chest. Almost there. Almost safe. No one would see what she'd done. No one would know she'd harbored an enemy beneath her roof. That's when his body went rigid. Nicky froze, feeling every muscle in his frame go taut despite the fever ravaging him. His head lifted slightly, and she saw his eyes had opened, wolf gold and unfocused, but staring at something beyond her shoulder. The forest. He was looking at the trees with an intensity that made her breath catch. Not just looking. Longing. His wolf was rising through the delirium, drawn to the sanctuary of wilderness, to freedom from chains and cages and the hands that had hurt him. A low sound rumbled in his chest. Desperate. Broken. Understanding hit her like a physical blow. He wanted to run. Needed to run. Every instinct in his battered body was screaming at him to disappear into those trees and never look back, to escape the thing that had enslaved him. Her. She was the thing that had enslaved him now. The thought made her stomach turn. She'd bought him. Paid for him like livestock. No matter her intentions, no matter that she'd meant to save him, in his eyes she must be just another captor. Another link in the chain of his suffering. Nicky's grip loosened. His eyes snapped to hers, confusion cutting through the fever haze. She met his gaze steadily, reading the question there, the disbelief that she would release him when he was too weak to fight. Go, she said quietly. If that's what you need. She stepped aside, letting her hands fall away from his waist. He swayed without her support, catching himself against nothing, his body barely able to stand. But his eyes never left the tree line, that dark sanctuary that promised everything he'd lost. Freedom. Safety. Solitude. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. The forest loomed behind him, so close he could reach it in a dozen desperate strides. She watched emotions flicker across his face too rapidly to name. Shock, suspicion, something that might have been gratitude warring with the animal need to survive. Then his wolf took over. The shift was instantaneous. One moment he was swaying on human legs, the next he was launching toward the trees with a burst of speed that should have been impossible in his condition. Pure instinct, pure desperation, the last reserves of strength channeled into a single bid for freedom. He made it 5 steps. Then his body betrayed him. Nicky watched in horror as his legs tangled, as momentum carried him forward while his strength gave out. He went down hard, hitting the forest floor with a sickening thud that drove the air from his lungs. The impact should have been enough to knock him unconscious, but somehow he was still moving, still trying to crawl toward the trees even as his limbs refused to cooperate. No, Nicky was running before conscious thought could stop her, dropping to her knees beside him. Stop, you're going to hurt yourself worse. His back arched violently, a convulsion that lifted him clear off the ground. She heard his spine crack, heard the wet sound of muscles tearing as the silver poison surged through him with renewed violence. His wolf had tried to save him, had burned through the last of his reserves, and now the poison was punishing him for it. He was dying. Right here in the dirt, he was dying. Nicky hooked her arms beneath his shoulders and pulled. He was dead weight, muscles locked in seizure, body fighting itself as his wolf and the silver waged war in his blood. She dragged him backward, her boots scrabbling for purchase on loose earth, every muscle in her body screaming that this was impossible, that she wasn't strong enough, that she should leave him and save herself. She kept pulling. Inch by agonizing inch, she hauled him away from the forest, away from the freedom he'd been reaching for. Her cottage materialized through the trees, small and weathered, but hers, the only sanctuary she could offer. She managed to drag him up the steps, through the door, collapsing with him in a heap on her floor as her strength finally gave out. For 10 seconds, she let herself feel it. The burn in her shoulders, the trembling in her legs, the impossibility of what she'd just done. Then she shoved it all aside and got to work. The burns were worse than she'd thought. Silver-edged and weeping, they circled his wrists and forearms where manacles had bitten deep. She fetched water and clean cloth, her healer's training taking over as she worked to clean away blood and ash and the accumulated filth of captivity. His fever raged beneath her touch, but she forced herself to stay focused. One wound at a time. One breath at a time. She could fall apart later. She was wrapping his left wrist when his hand moved. The speed of it shocked her faster than anything his condition should have allowed. His fingers locked around her wrist like a vice, grip fierce enough that she felt bones grind together. Nicky froze, pulse jumping beneath his touch. His eyes opened. Not human eyes. Not anymore. Pure gold stared up at her, wolf-bright and burning with recognition that transcended fever and pain and whatever remained of his rational mind. His wolf looked at her through those molten depths, and she felt something fundamental shift in the space between them. His lips moved, shaping a word that fell into the sudden silence like a stone into still water. Mate. The word resonated through her chest, through her bones, through parts of herself she'd learned to ignore. Her own wolf, dormant for so long she'd almost forgotten it existed, lifted its head at the call. No, that wasn't possible. Couldn't be possible. She was Omega, he was Alpha, and the gulf between them was vast as the distance between earth and sky. But his wolf didn't care about impossibilities. His grip on her wrist loosened, his hand falling away as consciousness fled again. His head lolled to the side, eyes rolling back, leaving her alone with the echo of that single word. Mate. Nicky sat frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs hard enough to hurt. She looked down at the unconscious Alpha sprawled across her floor, enemy, stranger, the walking embodiment of everything her people had been taught to fear. And felt something pulse between them. Faint as a whisper, fragile as new thread, but undeniably there. A bond. The beginning of something that should never exist, taking root despite every law of nature that said it couldn't. Nicky pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heartbeat synchronize with his for just a moment. 1 beat. 2. Then the connection faded, leaving only the echo of recognition behind. What have I done? She whispered to the empty cottage. But the Alpha didn't answer, and her wolf, newly stirring in the depths of her soul, had no words to offer. Only the certainty that everything had changed. And there was no going back. The bite that changes everything. Midnight brought the fever's breaking point. Nicky jerked awake in the chair beside her bed, her heart already racing before her mind registered what had woken her. The temperature in the room had spiked. Not gradually, but all at once, as if someone had opened a furnace door directly into her cottage. On the bed, the Alpha convulsed. His back arched so violently she heard vertebrae pop, his body lifting clear off the mattress. The sound that tore from his throat was barely human, a snarl wrapped around a scream, animalistic and raw. Silver burns that had been healing moments ago began weeping fresh blood as his body fought itself. Please, no, Nicky lunged for him, but his arm lashed out, catching her across the chest and sending her stumbling backward. Not an attack. A reflex. His body was shutting down, and his wolf was clawing its way to the surface in a desperate bid to save them both. The shift began. But it was wrong. Fractured. His bones cracked and reformed only to snap back into human shape, unable to complete the transformation. Fur rippled across his skin in patches, chest, arms, face, then receded like a tide being pulled back. His hands elongated into claws that shredded her sheets, leaving deep furrows in the mattress beneath. This wasn't a shift. This was his body tearing itself apart. Fight it, Nicky pleaded, even knowing he couldn't hear her. You have to stay human, you have to. His eyes opened. Pure gold. No white, no iris, just molten wolf staring out from a face caught between forms. And they fixed on her with an intensity that stole the breath from her lungs. Recognition. She saw it happen, saw the moment his wolf processed her scent. His nostrils flared, breathing her in despite the fever, despite the poison, despite everything trying to kill him. That broken sound came again, but different this time, longing mixed with desperation, a wolf who'd found something it needed more than air. Then he moved. One moment he was thrashing on the bed, the next he had her pinned against the wall with speed that defied his condition. His hand, more claw than hand, wrapped around her throat, not squeezing, but holding her in place. The heat of him was unbearable, fever burning through skin and cloth and the thin space between them. But he wasn't attacking. He buried his face against her neck and inhaled deep, shuddering breaths that pulled her scent into his lungs like he was drowning and she was air. A sound rumbled through his chest that made her own wolf stir, that dormant thing she'd learned to suppress lifting its head for the first time in years. The call of an alpha, primal and undeniable, resonating in parts of her she'd forgotten existed. "You don't know what you're doing," Nicky whispered, even as her body betrayed her. Her head tilted instinctively, exposing more of her throat to him. "Please, you're not in your right mind." "Mine." The word was barely speech, shaped by a mouth not quite meant for it. His other hand gripped her hip, hauling her closer until no space remained between them. His body curved around hers, caging her in, claiming her with every point of contact. "Mine, mine, mine." Each repetition sent a shockwave through the bond she'd been trying to deny. That fragile thread between them blazed brighter, no longer whisper-thin but growing stronger with every breath he took against her skin. Nicky's hands came up to push him away, she told herself. But the moment her palms pressed against his chest, something fundamental shifted. Her touch was acceptance. Permission. Confirmation of what his wolf already knew to be absolute truth. She felt his intent a split second before it happened. Felt his muscles coil, felt his jaw unhinge slightly, felt the moment his wolf decided to claim what belonged to it. "Wait, please." His teeth sank into her neck. The world exploded into white-hot agony. Nicky's scream tore through the cottage, raw and primal, as alpha venom flooded her system. This wasn't the gentle claiming bite of courtship, wasn't the controlled mark given with consent and ceremony. This was instinct made flesh, a wolf staking its claim in the only language it understood. Her bones cracked. Not metaphorically. She felt them splinter and reform, her skeleton restructuring itself to accommodate the venom coursing through her veins. Her wolf surged to life with violence that drove her to her knees, and the alpha went down with her, his teeth still buried deep, his body curved protectively around hers even as he destroyed her from the inside out. Fire burned through her blood. Every nerve ending lit up at once, pain and transformation and something darker, something that felt like dying and being reborn in the same excruciating moment. The bond between them blazed so bright she could see it behind her eyelids, gold and silver threads weaving together, binding soul to soul. "Stop," she sobbed, though she didn't know who she was begging. Him. Herself. The wolf tearing through her ribcage trying to answer his call. "Please, I can't." He released her. The moment his teeth withdrew, he collapsed. His body went limp against hers, the half-shift receding like water down a drain, leaving him naked and fever-slicked and utterly unconscious. The mark on her neck pulsed with every heartbeat, already starting to heal, but never fully. Alpha bite scarred. Always scarred. She would wear his claim for the rest of her life. Nicky pressed a shaking hand to the wound, feeling warm blood slip between her fingers. The pain was already fading, replaced by something else. Something that hummed beneath her skin, that whispered in the space between her thoughts. Claimed. Mated. His. "No," she whispered. But even as she said it, she knew it was too late. Whatever had been done couldn't be undone. The bond was there now, real and solid and undeniable. Her gaze fell on him, really seeing him for the first time. The fever had broken. His color was better, breathing steadier, the silver burns on his wrists already showing signs of accelerated healing. The claiming had saved him, pulled him back from death's edge by binding him to something worth living for. Her. He'd claimed her to survive. And in doing so, condemned them both. Movement caught her eye. A mark on his left shoulder, partially hidden by bruises and burns. She leaned closer, using her sleeve to wipe away dried blood and grime. Dark ink resolved into focus beneath her ministrations. A wolf's head crowned in silver thorns. Below it, a name written in the old script that made her blood run cold. Bieber. No. The word came out strangled. No. The Northern Bloodline. The Lost Alphas. Everyone knew the story. How the Beavers had ruled with strength and wisdom, how they'd been hunted to extinction during the Great Purge, their entire line wiped from existence by packs who feared their power. Everyone knew they were dead. All of them. Every last heir. Except they were wrong. She was looking at the proof. At the impossible survivor. At the last living heir to a throne that no longer existed. And he'd just marked her as his mate. What have I done? Nicky's voice cracked. What have we done? The bond pulsed between them, stronger now. She could feel him through it, feel his wolf settling into satisfied sleep, content in a way that transcended fever and poison and the horror of everything that had happened. His wolf had found its mate. Nothing else mattered. But everything else mattered. He was the most wanted wolf in 5 territories. The lost heir every pack had standing orders to kill on sight. And she'd brought him into her home, bound herself to him with a mark that could never be hidden, tied her fate to his in a way that meant when they came for him, and they would come, they'd kill her too. Nicky tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. The claiming had taken everything she had. Her wolf was awake now, prowling beneath her skin, drunk on alpha venom and the new bond singing in her veins. But her body had reached its limit. The room tilted sideways. She caught herself on the edge of the bed, but it wasn't enough. Her vision grayed at the edges, darkness creeping in as shock and blood loss, and the sheer impossibility of everything that had happened caught up with her all at once. She collapsed beside him, their bodies tangling together on the floor. His arm came around her even in unconsciousness, pulling her close, protective even now. The bond between them glowed faintly in the darkness, gold and silver threads winding together, pulsing in time with their synchronized heartbeats. 2 souls bound by fate and desperation, and a moment of impossible recognition. Outside, the wind picked up. And in the village below, wolves began to howl. They'd felt it, the snap of an alpha claiming, the birth of a bond that shouldn't exist. The sound carried through the night, spreading the news like wildfire. Something had changed in Crescent Pack territory. Something that could never be unchanged. In her cottage, Nicky heard the howls even as consciousness fled. She wanted to fear them, wanted to prepare for what was coming. But her wolf, newly woken and thrumming with alpha venom, felt only one thing. Peace. They'd found each other. And nothing else would ever matter quite as much. 2 lives entwined. Pain dragged her back to consciousness. Not her own, though her body screamed with its own litany of suffering. This was different, foreign, a bone-deep agony that lived in her chest, but belonged to someone else entirely. Nicky gasped, her eyes flying open to the cottage ceiling, hand clutching at her sternum where the sensation burned hottest. His heartbeat. She could feel it. Every labored thump, every struggle to push poison blood through damaged veins. The bond had rooted itself deeper while they slept, burrowing into places she didn't know existed, and now she was paying the price for an incomplete claiming. Beside her on the floor, Bieber convulsed. The movement was violent enough to slam his shoulder into hers, and Nicky rolled toward him on instinct. Every muscle in her body protested, shredded, aching, bones tender as if they'd been broken and poorly set. Her wolf prowled restlessly just beneath her skin, agitated by the incomplete bond, by the alpha suffering, by instincts she'd suppressed so long she'd forgotten their language. Stay with me, she whispered, reaching for him. Just hold on. Her spine arched without warning. The shift came like lightning, sudden, violent, unstoppable. Fur erupted across her arms, her jaw elongating before snapping back with a crack that tore a scream from her throat. Her ribcage expanded, contracted, bones grinding as they tried to reshape themselves and couldn't complete the transformation. Incomplete. The bond was incomplete, and her wolf was trying desperately to answer his call even though neither of them was strong enough to survive it. Through waves of agony, memories flickered behind her eyes. Not hers. A grand hall consumed by flames, tapestries burning like torches against stone walls. Screams echoing through corridors she'd never walked. Running, always running, small hands gripping his as they fled through passages that twisted and turned. His mother's face, beautiful even in terror, shoving him into darkness and whispering words that would haunt him forever. Live. Whatever it takes, you live. Then blood. So much blood pooling on marble floors. No, Nicky sobbed, trying to pull away from the visions flooding through the bond. But there was no escape. She was drowning in his trauma, living his nightmares, feeling the weight of a crown that had been ripped away before he was old enough to understand what it meant. His heartbeat stuttered, weakened, skipped. Terror shot through her, primal and absolute. If he died now, the incomplete bond would drag her down with him. Their wolves were already too entangled, too dependent on each other's existence. She might survive his death, technically, but she'd be hollow, a ghost walking through life with half her soul missing. "Don't you dare," she gasped, crawling toward him despite her body's protests. "Don't you dare die on me now. Not after, not after." The cottage door exploded inward. "Nicky." Rowan's voice cut through her haze of pain. She barely registered him crossing the room before his hands were on her, hauling her away from Bieber's body with a grip that shook. His face was pale as death, eyes wild with something between horror and rage. "What have you done?" His gaze raked over her, the raw bite mark on her neck still weeping blood, the way her body trembled on the edge of shifting, the unconscious alpha sprawled on her floor. "Sweet mercy, Nicky, what have you done?" Rowan, her voice was barely recognizable, roughened by screaming. "I didn't mean it wasn't. You've been claimed." He released her like she burned him, stumbling back several steps. Bitten. Marked. By an alpha. His eyes found the tattoo on Bieber's shoulder. She watched recognition dawn across his features, watched horror transform into something darker, colder. "That mark." Rowan's voice dropped to a whisper. That's impossible. The Bieber line is extinct. They're all dead." "He was dying," Nicky said, hating how weak she sounded. "At the auction, they were going to let him die, and I couldn't, I had to." "So you brought him here?" Rowan's laugh was sharp, brittle, edged with hysteria. "You brought the last living heir of the Northern Bloodline into your cottage and let him claim you? Do you have any idea what you've done? What this means?" A growl rumbled through the room. Both of them froze. Bieber hadn't moved, was still unconscious, chest barely rising with shallow breaths. But his wolf was aware. Even barely clinging to life, it sensed threat to its mate. The sound deepened, resonating in a frequency that made Nicky's bones vibrate and sent Rowan stumbling backward. "I'm taking you out of here." Rowan's jaw set with determination. "Right now. Before anyone else discovers what." "No. Nicky, please." "I said no." She planted herself between Rowan and the alpha despite her trembling legs. "I'm not leaving him. He'll get you killed." Rowan's composure cracked like a dam breaking. "When they find out what he is, when they discover you've been harboring him, hiding the last Bieber, they'll execute you. Both of you. Is that what you want? To die for someone you barely know?" "I know enough." Even as she said it, more memories flashed through the bond. A sister's laugh. His mother braiding his hair. The weight of a wooden practice sword. Everything he'd lost. "You know nothing." Rowan grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. "This isn't about saving a life anymore. This is war, Nicky. This is political assassination and territorial disputes and blood feuds that go back generations. The Southern Packs want the Bieber line extinct, completely extinct. And you just painted the biggest target imaginable on your back by binding yourself to him." Through the bond, she felt Bieber's pain spike. His heartbeat faltered, struggled, barely managed to find its rhythm again. The sensation drove her to her knees. "The bond," she gasped. "If he dies, I die. It's incomplete. It's killing us both." "Then let me end it." Rowan's voice went cold and practical. "Quickly. Cleanly. Better than what they'll do when they find you. Better for you both than slow death from an unstable bond." The growl came again, louder. Bieber's hand twitched, claws extending even in unconsciousness. His wolf wouldn't allow anyone to harm her. Not even to save her from the consequences of their bond. "You'd have to go through him first," Nicky said quietly. "And even dying, I don't think you'd survive it." Rowan stared at her, betrayal written across every line of his face. "I've known you since we were children. I've protected you, stood up for you when others whispered about the weak Omega. And this is how you repay that loyalty? By choosing him. I didn't choose this. Her hand drifted to the mark on her neck. But yes, I'm choosing him now. Then you're choosing death. Rowan's hands dropped to his sides. And I won't watch you throw your life away for foolishness. He turned toward the door, and panic clawed at Nicky's throat. Rowan, please wait. I'm going to. The council. He stopped at the threshold but didn't turn back. I'll give you until dawn. That's all I can offer. Take him and run. Disappear into the borderlands where no one will find you. Or stay and face judgment. But I won't lie for you. Not about this. Rowan. Until dawn, Nicky. That's my final act of friendship. His shoulders tensed. After that, you're on your own. The door closed behind him with terrible finality. Nicky stood frozen in the silence that followed, the weight of his words crushing down on her chest. Until dawn. Maybe 4 hours, 5 if she was lucky. 4 hours to choose between running and fighting, between abandoning everything she'd built here and standing her ground to face execution. Through the bond, she felt Bieber's heartbeat weakening again. The choice had already been made. She turned back to him, dropping to her knees at his side. His fever had spiked again despite the claiming, his wolf burning through reserves it didn't have, trying to protect her from threats it couldn't fight. The bond pulsed erratically between them, unstable, incomplete, demanding a completion that neither of them was strong enough to give. I'm sorry, she whispered, pressing her hand over his heart. I'm so sorry I dragged you into this. You should have run when I gave you the chance. Should have disappeared into those trees and never looked back. His hand moved, fingers brushing against hers. Not a conscious gesture, just his body seeking hers even in the depths of unconsciousness. The bond flared at the contact, and she felt his wolf reaching for her through the darkness. Mate. Mine. Stay. I'm here, she promised, threading their fingers together. I'm not going anywhere. The room tilted. She felt it happening, her body finally admitting what her mind had been denying. The incomplete bond was draining her, pulling life force she didn't have to give, demanding completion even as it killed them both. Her vision grayed at the edges, darkness creeping in with patient inevitability. Just a little longer, she whispered to no one. Hold on just a little. Her strength gave out. She collapsed across his chest, her body shutting down from blood loss and shock, and the sheer impossible weight of everything that had happened. His arm came around her automatically, pulling her closer even in unconsciousness, protective until the very end. The bond flickered between them, gold and silver threads fraying at the edges, unraveling slowly, inevitably, unless something changed. Outside, the sky was still dark. Dawn was hours away, but in the village, lights were beginning to appear in windows. Wolves were waking, sensing the disturbance in their territory, feeling the incomplete bond like a wound in the fabric of their pack consciousness. They would come. Soon. And when they did, they would find 2 wolves dying in each other's arms, bound by a fate neither had chosen but both were powerless to escape. In the cottage, their hearts beat in fragile synchronization. One rhythm. One life. Fading together into the dark. The only way to save him is to claim him. Death had a taste. Metallic and bitter, flooding her mouth like she'd bitten into rotting meat. Nicky woke choking on it, rolling onto her side as her body tried desperately to expel the wrongness. But it wouldn't leave because it wasn't in her mouth, it was in her soul, seeping through the bond like poison through veins. His heart was dying. She felt each beat with horrible clarity. Weak. Irregular. The silver had finally reached its target, wrapping around the chambers of his heart like barbed wire, squeezing tighter with every failed pump. His wolf was still fighting, but it was losing ground, retreating to some deep place inside him where it could die with whatever dignity remained. The sensation made her want to tear her own chest open. No, she gasped, dragging herself toward him across the floor. No, you don't get to do this. He looked like a corpse waiting to be buried. Gray skin stretched tight over bones, lips blue-tinged, the rise and fall of his chest so shallow she had to press her ear against his sternum to confirm it was happening at all. The proud mark on his shoulder, That declaration of his bloodline seemed to mock her now. What good was noble heritage when you died alone on a stranger's floor? Through the bond, she felt his wolf letting go. Not giving up exactly. Just releasing. Accepting. Withdrawing to whatever space waited beyond life, preparing to face death the way alphas were supposed to, with dignity, with courage, without dragging anyone else down into the dark. Her wolf surged forward in response. Not with violence this time. Gently, like a whisper made of fur and fangs and desperate knowing. It pressed against her consciousness with an urgency that transcended pain, transcended fear, transcended every rational thought screaming that she wasn't strong enough for this. Complete the bond. It's the only way. I can't, Nicky whispered, even as her gaze fixed on the unmarked side of his throat. I'm Omega. I don't have the strength to. The world shifted. Reality folded in on itself, and suddenly she stood in a forest that existed only in the space between heartbeats. Silver moonlight filtered through leaves that chimed like bells, and before her sat a wolf. Small. Compact. Nothing like the massive beasts that alphas became. But her wolf's eyes burned with a ferocity that made Nicky's breath catch in her throat, made her remember that size had never been the measure of strength. He chose us. Her wolf's voice was hers, but deeper, resonant with truths she'd spent years trying to forget. When his wolf was mad with fever and poison, dying and desperate, it could have claimed anyone. The first female it scented. The nearest warm body. But it chose us. Because I was the only one there. Because his soul recognized ours. The wolf rose, padding closer until they stood nose to nose. Because fate doesn't care about pack politics or bloodlines or which side of a war your parents fought on. He is ours, and we are his, and that's all that's ever mattered. Tears streamed down Nicky's face. But I'm not enough. I'm just an Omega, I'm weak, You're his mate. Her wolf's voice gentled, became almost tender. And right now, in this moment, that makes you the most powerful creature in this territory. Because you're the only one who can save him. How? The word broke on a sob. I don't know how to complete a bond I've never. You already know. Golden eyes held hers steadily. Your body knows. Your soul knows. You just have to be brave enough to let go. The vision shattered like glass. She was back in her cottage, gasping, her hand pressed over the mark on her neck. It burned beneath her fingers, incomplete, aching, a question asked but never answered, a sentence started but never finished. Rowan's words echoed in her memory. If he dies, you die too. But that wasn't what moved her. It wasn't fear of her own death that had her crawling across the floor toward Bieber's still form. It was the certainty, bone deep and absolute, that a world without him wasn't a world worth surviving in. She'd known him for less than a day. Had barely exchanged words with him. But their souls had recognized each other in that moment of claiming, and now the thought of existing without that recognition felt like being asked to live without half her heart. Don't you dare leave me, she whispered, her hands framing his face. His skin was ice-cold beneath her palms, all the fever burned away. Do you hear me? Don't you dare give up now. His heartbeat stuttered through the bond. Once. Twice. Stopped. No. The scream tore from her throat, raw and animal. No, you don't get to do this. You claimed me, you bit me, you made me yours. You don't get to die and leave me with this. She pressed her fingers to his throat, searching desperately for a pulse. Nothing. His chest had gone still, no breath moving in or out. The bond between them flickered like a candle in a hurricane, golden threads snapping one by one. Her wolf threw back its head and howled. The sound ripped out of her, anguish and fury and desperate, clawing refusal. It wasn't fair. She'd spent her whole life making herself small, invisible, unremarkable. Had learned to want nothing, expect nothing, need nothing. And then he'd stumbled into her life and shown her what it meant to be truly seen by another soul. She couldn't lose that. Wouldn't lose it. Not without a fight. The realization crystallized with diamond clarity. There was no medicine that could save him now. No prayer to gods who'd never answered her. No magic except the oldest kind. The bond between mates, the recognition of souls, the completion of a claim. She had to bite him back. Moonlight spilled through her window, crimson and strange. Nicky's gaze snapped to it, and her breath caught. A blood moon. She'd heard the stories from her grandmother, how the red moon made bonds stronger, magic wilder, wolves more themselves than they'd ever been. Rare and potent, appearing maybe once in a lifetime. A sign. An omen. A gift from a universe that had taken everything else. "Forgive me," she whispered, though she didn't know if she was asking forgiveness from him or herself or the life she was about to irrevocably alter. "Forgive me for being selfish. For choosing this. For choosing you." She bent to his throat. His pulse point was there, just beneath the surface. Silent. Still. Dead. She pressed her lips to it first, a benediction, a promise, a prayer to whatever forces might be listening. Then she felt her teeth sharpen, felt her wolf rise to meet the moment with fierce certainty. This was right. This was meant to be. This was the only way forward. "Come back to me," she breathed against his skin. And bit down. The reaction was instantaneous and catastrophic. Bieber's body arched off the floor like he'd been struck by lightning, his spine bowing with such violence she heard bones crack. A roar exploded from his throat, raw and primal and alive, so beautifully, impossibly alive. His heart started beating. She felt it through the bond, through her teeth buried in his flesh, through every atom of her being that screamed recognition. One beat. Two. Stronger. Stronger. The poison fled before the onslaught of completed mate bond, driven out by something older and more fundamental than Silver's corruption could ever be. Their wolves collided in the space between souls. Not desperately this time. Not with the jagged, broken edge that had characterized their first connection. This was different, a recognition so profound it bypassed consciousness entirely, bypassed thought and fear and every learned hesitation. Her small, fierce wolf and his massive, wounded one came together like puzzle pieces, like roots seeking water, like magnets that had been held apart too long finally allowed to snap into perfect alignment. The bond exploded. Gold and silver light erupted from their bodies, filling the cottage with radiance that had no earthly source. It poured from their joined forms, from the marks on their necks, from the space between heartbeats where souls touched and merged and became something greater than the sum of their parts. Too bright. Too powerful. Too much to contain or control. Nicky tried to pull back, but his hand came up to cradle the back of her head, holding her in place, not roughly, not possessively, but reverently, as if she were something precious that might shatter. His other hand found her waist, and she realized with a shock that cut through everything else that his eyes were open. Clear. Gold. Devastatingly aware. "Mate," he whispered, and it was question and answer and prayer all woven into one word. Then the bond completed. The force of it threw them both backward, their bodies separating for a heartbeat before crashing back together. Nicky felt her consciousness shatter and reform, felt her wolf settle into a peace so profound she hadn't known such a thing existed. Their heartbeats synchronized, not just similar but identical, two rhythms becoming one single pulse. Their breaths matched. Their souls, for better or worse, for as long as they both lived, were now irrevocably, completely, perfectly bound. When the light finally faded, they lay tangled together in the wreckage of her cottage. Both gasping. Both alive. Both fundamentally changed in ways that went deeper than flesh and bone. Bieber's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing the path of tears she didn't remember shedding. His voice was rough from disuse, but achingly gentle. "You saved me," he said. Not a question. A statement of fact. Again. "You saved me first," she whispered back. "When you chose me. When your wolf recognized mine. My wolf is wiser than I've ever been." His forehead pressed against hers, and she felt the bond between them pulse with contentment, with completion, with the rightness of two halves finally made whole. "Nicky. My Nicky." Hearing her name in his voice for the first time made something crack open in her chest. Outside, the blood moon painted the world in shades of crimson and shadow. And in the village below, Every wolf for miles threw back their heads and howled. Recognition of a completed bond, acknowledgement of a fate that should never have been but now could never be undone. The sound should have terrified her. Should have reminded her of everything they still faced, all the danger yet to come. But wrapped in her mate's arms, their hearts beating as one, Nicky felt only peace. They had found each other. And nothing, not pack law, not blood feuds, not death itself, would ever tear them apart again. Two wolves rising. The transformation came like an earthquake. One moment Nicky was human, wrapped in Bieber's arms with their hearts beating in perfect synchronization. The next, her body was unmaking itself. Not painfully this time, inevitably. As if every cell had been holding its breath, waiting for permission to finally become what it was always meant to be. Her bones reshaped with fluid precision. Fur erupted across her skin in waves of russet and gold, each strand catching the blood moon's light. Her senses exploded outward, the world suddenly layered with scents and sounds she'd never been able to process before, information flooding her consciousness in a symphony of awareness. Beside her, Bieber shifted too. His transformation was poetry, smooth and practiced, the change of a wolf who'd done this 10,000 times. But there was something fundamentally different about it now. Power flooded into him through the completed bond, burning away the last traces of silver poison, restoring strength that had been stripped away by torture and captivity. When the shifts completed, two wolves stood in the ruins of her cottage. Nicky looked down at herself in wonder. Small, yes, her frame would never match an alpha's massive build. But her coat shimmered like she'd been dusted with starlight, russet, and gold threaded with silver-white luminescence. The physical manifestation of a true mate bond, rare enough that most wolves lived entire lives without witnessing one. She glowed. Bieber's wolf was magnificent. Massive shoulders, powerful haunches, his coat the color of storm clouds, dark silver that shifted and changed in the light like smoke given form. But his eyes were what stole her breath. Pure molten gold, burning with intelligence and awareness, and something that looked terrifyingly like worship. He moved toward her with deliberate care, and she felt his intentions through the bond before he acted. Protective. Reverent. Mine. Ours. Forever. His larger form curved around hers, shielding her from the door, from the windows, from any threat that might dare approach. A rumble vibrated through his massive chest, not a growl but a purr, the sound of a wolf who'd found something he'd been searching for his entire life without knowing he was lost. Then the world outside erupted with sound. Howls pierced the night, dozens, maybe hundreds, rising from every corner of the territory. Nicky's ears flattened instinctively. This wasn't greeting or celebration. This was alarm, recognition, the collective response of an entire pack feeling something unprecedented snap into place in their consciousness. An alpha bond. A true mate claiming. A force of nature they couldn't ignore. She felt Bieber tense beside her, his head lifting as he processed the responses. Some howls carried curiosity, others fear. And threading through them all, she caught notes of anger and threat and something that made her hackles rise. Danger. They were in danger. Through the bond, she sensed his confusion. His memories were still fragmented, scattered by trauma and silver poisoning. But his wolf understood what those howls meant. They'd just announced their presence to everyone who'd been hunting him. The cottage door exploded inward. Nicky spun, teeth baring on instinct, but Bieber was already there, a wall of muscle and fury between her and the entrance. A snarl ripped from his throat that shook the floorboards, that resonated in frequencies meant to command submission from lesser wolves. 3 wolves stood in the doorway, pack scouts with shock written across their lupin features. Behind them, more were gathering. Nicky could hear them, smell them. A crowd assembling to witness whatever impossibility had just occurred in their territory. One scout shifted, bones cracking as he forced himself back to human form. His voice shook with accusation. Witch touched. The Omega's been witch touched. She corrupted the Alpha, used dark magic to bind him against his will. Bieber's roar cut him off. The sound was primal, absolute, a declaration that needed no translation. Every wolf within hearing distance froze as instinct forced them to acknowledge the dominance of a true alpha. Even the scouts, seasoned warriors who'd faced death before, couldn't stop their heads from lowering in automatic submission. But it was more than just alpha command. The bond between Nicky and Bieber blazed visible now, even to those outside. Gold and silver light poured from both of them, intertwining in patterns too complex for any magic to create, too pure for corruption to touch. There was no taint in that light, no shadow of dark work or force claiming. It was sacred, undeniable, real. An elderly female shifted at the crowd's edge, her gray-muzzled wolf form moving with the careful dignity of age and wisdom. When she spoke, her voice carried weight that made even the boldest scout step back. A true bond. Wonder colored her words. Sweet mercy and moonlight, it's a true mate bond. Murmurs rippled through the gathered wolves. True bonds were legend, the kind of thing grandmothers whispered about but few ever witnessed. They couldn't be forced or faked, couldn't be manufactured through magic or manipulation. They simply were soul-recognizing soul across whatever barriers existed between them. That's impossible, the scout protested, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. An omega and an alpha can't form a true bond. The power differential alone would. Tell that to the bond, the elder said dryly, gesturing at the light still radiating from the mated pair. Nicky felt Bieber's focus shifting. His consciousness was rising fully now, memories piecing themselves back together through the clarity the completed bond provided. She caught flashes through their connection, sensations, images, fragments of a past he'd been trying to survive. Running through moonlit forest, silver nets dropping from trees like spider webs. Betrayal in eyes he'd trusted. A voice speaking his death sentence. The southern packs send their regards. Pain as silver chains bit into his wrists, burning down to bone. The auction block, faces blurring together in fever, until one scent cut through everything else like a knife through silk. Hers. He'd smelled her before he'd seen her. His wolf had known before his mind could comprehend. The shift back came suddenly. One moment he was wolf, the next human, his body reforming with practiced ease despite everything he'd endured. He swayed slightly, catching himself against the doorframe, magnificent and naked and entirely unconcerned by the crowd watching. His eyes found Nicky immediately, as if she were the only thing in the world that mattered. She shifted too. More awkward, less practiced, her first voluntary transformation in years. When she stood on two legs again, she was acutely aware of her own nakedness, of the mate mark blazing on her neck like a brand, of every pair of eyes fixed on them with expressions ranging from awe to horror. Bieber didn't seem to notice anyone else existed. He crossed to her with single-minded purpose, and the crowd parted instinctively, making space for an alpha claiming his mate, for something their instincts recognized as holy. When he reached her, his hand came up to cup her face with a tenderness that contradicted every line of brutal power in his body. Nicky. Her name in his voice for the second time, and it still made her chest crack open. His thumb traced her cheekbone, his gold eyes searching hers as if memorizing every detail, every shade, every secret. My mate. My salvation. 2 words. 3. Simple and absolute and world-changing. The bond flared between them, visible to everyone watching, gold and silver threads winding together in patterns that spoke of fate and choice and something older than pack law. Nicky felt tears streak down her face, relief and joy and terror mixing until she couldn't separate one emotion from another. Yes, she whispered. Always yes. His forehead pressed against hers, and despite the crowd, despite the danger, despite the impossibility of everything that had happened, there was only them. 2 souls that had found each other across bloodlines and borders and every reason they should never have met. They're going to try to separate us, he murmured, quiet enough that only she could hear. When they realize who I am, what it means that I'm alive. Let them try. Steel entered her voice. I didn't complete this bond just to let someone break it. A smile ghosted across his lips, sad and fierce and proud. My brave Omega. Your equal, she corrected gently. His eyes widened slightly, then softened with something that looked like reverence. Yes, my equal. Outside, howls continued spreading the news across the territory. An alpha had risen. A true bond had formed. The impossible had become real. Rowan's voice cut through the moment like a blade. Seize them both. He pushed through the crowd, face twisted with barely controlled fury. By order of the council, they're to be detained for questioning regarding. You would break a true mate bond? The elder's voice cracked like a whip. Her eyes swept the crowd, challenging each wolf in turn. That's not pack law. That's sacrilege. Uncertainty rippled through the gathered wolves. Pack law was absolute, yes, but so were certain taboos. True bonds were sacred. Protected by traditions that went back further than any written record, older than the packs themselves. Rowan's face flushed. He's alive, the elder interrupted. Bonded. And under the protection of ancient law, whether you approve or not. You don't understand, Rowan's voice rose desperately. That mark on his shoulder. We see it, the elder said calmly. And? The standoff held for a long moment, tension thick enough to choke on. Then Bieber spoke, his voice carrying the natural command of someone born to lead, raised to rule, forged in fire to survive. I am Bieber. He raised his chin, meeting every gaze without flinching. Last heir of the Northern Bloodline. Last survivor of the massacre that destroyed my family, my pack, my home. His hand tightened on Nicky's waist, drawing her closer. And I claim sanctuary under mate bond law. Silence crashed over the gathering like a physical force. Then someone gasped. Another wolf backed away. Recognition and fear spread through the crowd in waves. The lost heir, someone whispered. They said they were all dead. The southern packs have bounties. This changes everything. Rowan's face had gone white as bone. You're supposed to be dead, he breathed. You're all supposed to be dead. Bieber's smile was all teeth and no humor. Disappointed. The word hung in the air like an accusation. This is treason, Rowan said, but his voice lacked conviction now. Harboring an enemy alpha, hiding a wanted wolf. Saving my mate's life, Nicky said clearly, her voice carrying to every listening ear. That's not treason. That's what the bond demanded. What any of you would do in my place. The elder nodded slowly. The girl speaks truth. True bonds supersede pack boundaries, political alliances, even blood feuds. It is the oldest law we have. The law is wrong, Rowan spat. The law is absolute. The elder's eyes went hard as flint. And you would do well to remember that, Beta Rowan. Unless you wish to stand accused of suggesting we abandon our oldest traditions. The threat was clear. Rowan fell silent, rage simmering in his eyes. Bieber addressed the crowd, his voice resonating with authority that hadn't been there before the bond. I make no claims on your territory. I ask no allegiance. I seek only what the law allows. Sanctuary with my mate, time to heal, and safe passage when we choose to leave. And where will you go? Someone called out. Bieber's jaw tightened. North. To reclaim what was taken. To see what remains of my homeland. You'll find only graves, Rowan said viciously. Then I'll honor them. Bieber's voice didn't waver. And I'll rebuild. Because that's what the last heir does. That's what I owe to those who died so I could live. The crowd shifted, whispers spreading like wildfire. Some looked sympathetic. Others fearful. A few appeared calculating, already weighing political implications. The elder stepped forward, placing herself between the mated pair and the crowd. The law has spoken, she declared. The bond is recognized. Sanctuary is granted, temporarily. The council will meet at dawn to determine next steps. Her gaze swept to Bieber and Nicky. Until then, you have safe harbor in this territory. Thank you, Nicky whispered. The elder's expression softened slightly. Don't thank me yet, child. Dawn will bring its own challenges. She looked at Bieber. You've stirred something that cannot be unstirred. The southern packs will learn you live. And when they do, they'll find me ready. Bieber's eyes blazed gold. I've spent 10 years running. I'm done running. The elder nodded slowly. Then may the moon guide you both. She turned and walked away, the crowd parting before her. Slowly, reluctantly, the other wolves began to disperse, some returning to their homes, others lingering at the edges, watching with hungry eyes. Rowan was the last to leave. He stood in the doorway, staring at Nicky with an expression she couldn't read. "You've chosen your path," he said quietly. "I hope it doesn't lead to your destruction." Then he was gone, leaving them alone in the wreckage of her cottage. Bieber pulled Nicky closer, burying his face in her hair. She felt him trembling. Not from weakness now, but from the weight of everything that had just happened. "I'm sorry," he whispered against her temple. "I've brought danger to your door. I've marked you, claimed you, tied your fate to mine without asking if it was what you wanted. Stop." She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "I chose this. Every step of the way I chose this. I chose you." "Why?" The word broke on something that sounded like wonder. "You didn't know me. Didn't owe me anything. Why would you risk everything for a stranger?" Nicky smiled, pressing her hand over his heart where their bond pulsed warm and certain. "Because my wolf knew what my mind didn't. That you weren't a stranger." She rose on her toes, pressing her forehead to his. "You were always mine. I was just waiting for you to find me." His arms tightened around her, and for a long moment they stood there. Two wolves who'd found each other against impossible odds, who'd chosen each other despite every reason not to. Outside, the blood moon was beginning to set. Dawn was coming. And with it, whatever consequences their bond had wrought. The warriors came at dawn. Nicky counted 12 of them, armed and armored, forming a semicircle around her cottage. Rowan stood at their center, his face a mask of righteous authority that didn't quite hide the panic in his eyes. "Stand aside, Nicky," he called out, his voice carrying across the clearing. "This doesn't have to involve you." Bieber laughed. The sound was dark and sharp, nothing like the fevered alpha she'd dragged home days ago. He stood on her threshold fully healed, the silver burns faded to pale scars, his aura blazing with a power that made the air shimmer. The completed mate bond had done more than save his life, it had restored him. "It involves her," Bieber said, stepping forward to place himself between Nicky and the warriors. "Everything involves her now. She's my mate. She's a traitor." Rowan's hand tightened on his sword hilt. "And you're a dead man who doesn't know he's already buried." Bieber's smile was all teeth. "Am I? Tell me, Rowan, how exactly did a lone alpha from the Northern Bloodline end up in your territory's auction? How did your scouts manage to capture someone who'd evaded every hunting party for a decade?" The silence that followed was damning. Nicky felt understanding dawn through the bond before Bieber spoke the words aloud. She'd wondered, in the quiet moments while tending his wounds, how someone so powerful had been taken. Now she knew. "You sold him out," she breathed. Rowan's face went carefully blank. "I don't know what." "The ambush in the northern forest," Bieber continued, his voice dropping to something cold and lethal. "I was there following a lead about survivors. My family's survivors. Someone sent word that there were Biebers hiding in the mountain caves, that they needed help." His gold eyes locked on Rowan. "You sent that message. That's a lie." "Is it?" Bieber took another step forward, and 3 of the warriors shifted nervously. "You knew I'd come. Knew I couldn't ignore the possibility that my sister or my mother had survived. So you baited the trap and delivered me gift-wrapped to the southern packs." "Even if that were true," Rowan said, and Nicky heard the admission in his careful words, it was for the good of the territory. The northern territories needed to stay dead. The bloodline needed to end. "Why?" Nicky's voice cracked like a whip. "What did they ever do to you? They existed." Rowan's mask cracked, revealing the hatred beneath. "Do you know what it's like living in the shadow of their legend? The great Biebers, the noble bloodline, the alphas who could do no wrong. While the rest of us scrambled for scraps of territory and respect. So you murdered them." Bieber's hands curled into fists. "Children. Elders. My 6-year-old sister." "I gave the information," Rowan corrected. "What the Southern Packs did with it was their business." The casual admission hung in the air like poison. One of the warriors, a young female Nicky recognized from the village, took a step back, horror written across her face. Others were exchanging glances, their certainty wavering. "You confessed to genocide," the old female from last night said, materializing from the crowd that had gathered at the edges of the clearing. "In front of witnesses. In front of your own pack." Rowan's composure shattered. "Take them." He drew his sword, pointing it at Bieber. "No, that's an order." The warriors hesitated. "I said now." 4 of them moved, more from trained obedience than conviction. But 4 was enough. They rushed forward in a coordinated assault, silver-edged weapons gleaming in the dawnlight. Bieber shifted. The transformation was instantaneous, power and fury given form. His wolf was massive, easily twice the size of the attacking warriors, his storm cloud coat rippling with barely contained violence. A roar tore from his throat, not animal, not quite human, something that resonated with ancient authority. The warriors skidded to a halt. But Rowan shifted too, his brown wolf leaping over his own men to go straight for Bieber's throat. There was nothing honorable in the attack, nothing fair. Just desperation and the need to eliminate a threat before it destroyed him. Nicky didn't think. Her wolf surged forward with a speed that surprised even her. One moment she was human, the next she was fur and fangs, throwing herself between Rowan and her mate. She was smaller, weaker, but the bond burned in her veins like liquid fire, lending her strength she'd never known she possessed. Her teeth caught Rowan's shoulder, ripping through fur and muscle. He yelped, twisting away, and Bieber was there, a silver storm of wrath and retribution. His jaws closed around Rowan's throat, not killing, not yet, but holding him immobile. The message was clear: yield or die. Rowan went limp. Around them, the other warriors had backed away, some shifting to human form with their hands raised in surrender. The young female spoke, her voice shaking. "We didn't know about the massacre, about what he did. We were following orders." Bieber released Rowan, who collapsed gasping on the ground. When Bieber shifted back, there was blood on his mouth and murder in his eyes. "You have a choice," he said, his voice carrying to everyone assembled. "You can stand with the traitor who orchestrated the slaughter of innocents. Or you can stand with a mate bond recognized by your own laws." "He's an enemy alpha," one of the remaining warriors protested weakly. Bieber agreed. "But your packmate chose me. Bought me when no one else would. Saved my life when it would have been easier to let me die." His gaze swept the crowd. She had nothing to gain and everything to lose. And she did it anyway. The old female stepped forward again, and Nicky recognized the weight of her presence now. Elder. She was pack elder, the keeper of law and tradition. "A true mate bond supersedes pack boundaries," she said formally. "It is the oldest law we have. To break it is to invite the wrath of the moon herself." "Then the law is wrong," Rowan spat from the ground. "The law is absolute." The elder's eyes were hard. "And you, Rowan, stand accused of conspiring in the massacre of the Northern Bloodline. That is a crime that carries only one sentence: death." The word hung unspoken in the air. Rowan's face went white. "You can't, the council. The council will be informed," the elder said. "Until then, you are stripped of rank and detained." She gestured, and 2 of the warriors moved to haul Rowan to his feet. "Take him to the holding cells." As they dragged him away, Rowan's eyes fixed on Nicky with pure hatred. "You'll regret this, Omega. When he remembers who he really is, when he rebuilds his power, you'll just be the convenient mate he needed to survive." The words hit like daggers. Bieber's hand found hers, threading their fingers together. His voice, when he spoke, carried to every wolf present. "I am Bieber, last heir of the Northern Bloodline, alpha of the Lost Territories." He raised their joined hands. "And I declare before witnesses that Nicky is my true mate, my Luna, my chosen destiny." The formal words sent a ripple through the crowd. A declaration like that was binding, witnessed, unbreakable. But Bieber wasn't done. He turned to Nicky, his free hand coming up to cup her face. His voice dropped, meant only for her even though everyone could hear. The Omega who was once rejected, he said, his thumb tracing her cheekbone, is now Luna of 2 Packlands, heirmate to the Northern Bloodline, and the only destiny I will ever claim. Tears streaked down Nicky's face. I don't know how to be. You're already everything you need to be. He pressed his forehead to hers. You were brave enough to save me. Everything else, we'll figure out together. The crowd erupted. Not in protest, in howls. Recognition, acceptance, celebration of a bond that defied every expectation. Even the warriors who'd come to arrest them were howling, caught up in the undeniable rightness of what they'd witnessed. Bieber lifted Nicky into his arms as if she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest. She buried her face in his neck, overwhelmed by everything that had happened, everything that had changed. His lips found the mate mark on her throat, pressing a kiss there that sent shivers through the bond. You spent your last coin to save me, he whispered against her skin, quiet enough that only she could hear. I will spend every breath to keep you. It was a vow and a promise and a threat to anyone who might try to separate them. Nicky's arms tightened around his neck. Where do we go from here? North, he said simply. To reclaim what was taken. To rebuild what was destroyed. He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. Together. The words settled into her chest like a key finding its lock. Together. Not as Alpha and Omega. Not as conqueror and conquered or hunter and prey, or any of the roles their world tried to assign them. Just as 2 souls who'd found each other across bloodlines and betrayal and every reason they should never have met. As mates. As equals. As destiny finally fulfilled.